Welcome back to Top 5 DEI, the premier podcast about and for professionals who cultivate diversity, equity, and inclusion in their craft, and where we build connections with 5 questions. Get ready to dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Top 5 DEI, the premier podcast for and about professionals who practice diversity, equity, and inclusion in their craft. I'm your host, Dr. J, and I'm here with
Dr. Miller, a.k.a. the Petty Professor.
And I'm Tanai Lambert, first time.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today for our special guest, and of course, all of our guests are special. This individual we've known for some time, in the conferences together. He's a brilliant researcher, great person. I'm going to dive into his bio. Darryl B. Rice, PhD, or Dr. Ice to his colleagues and students. I love that. It's funny how you learn new things about people, right? I had no idea. That's wonderful. Dr. Ice is the Richard T. Farmer Associate Professor of Management at Miami University, and an associate editor at the Journal of Managerial Psychology. Dr. Rice earned his PhD in business administration with a concentration in management at the University of Central Florida, his MBA with a concentration in leadership from Jacksonville University, and his BS, bachelor's in finance, multinational business operations from Florida State University. He's an award-winning scholar and teacher. His research adopts an employee-centered approach across 4 areas. That's organizational justice, behavioral ethics, well-being and stress, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Rice is internationally recognized for his research, which has been published in leading scholarly journals, such as Journal of Management Studies, Human Relations, Journal of Business Ethics. I could go on and on. His work also appears in the Oxford Handbook of Organizational Justice, and his research has been presented and featured at conferences such as the Academy of Management, Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, and Southern Management Association. He primarily teaches Introduction to Management and Leadership and Diversity and Cross-Cultural Management. He has also been an invited guest to organizational justice and behavioral ethics themed conferences. Additionally, Dr. Rice is involved with the PhD project, and he frequently speaks to high school students about transitioning from high school to college through Miami's Make It Miami College Prep Program and Alpha Phi Alpha's Go to High School, Go to College National Program. Prior to academia, Dr. Rice was an investment manager analyst for Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. While working in the financial services industry, he obtained his Series 7 and Series 66 securities licenses. So he was making that money, y'all. So he's really committed to what he's doing to walk away from all that money. Dr. Rice, Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. Definitely looking forward to the opportunity to join this amazing team of hosts at Top 5 DEI. And there's actually a cool story about how I got that nickname, Dr. Ice. So when I showed up at UCF as a doctoral student, I was, you're working as a teaching assistant. And my professor put up my email address. If students need any, help, contact Darryl. Here's his email. And my email address was drice@ucf.edu. But one of the students asked me, how did I get the school to give me Dr. Ice as an email address? And I was like, it's just my first initial last name. But then the name just kind of stuck because in a, PhD program, you're always stressed, right? It's crazy. It's demanding, but they never saw me like sweat. They was like, you just seem like nothing ever bothers you. So, Mike Soupster, was like, you're Dr. Ice. And it kind of just stuck from there. I have a campus visit, Carlos, you would appreciate this, job market year. I have a campus visit at Miami University. One of the colleagues who was at Miami was like, tell me something that happened to you as a doctoral student that you had no idea. And then I tell him like how I got the name. I was like, yeah, one of my students thought it was Dr. Rice. I went to UCF and said, give me Dr. Rice. And it was D Rice at ucf.edu. he started laughing, and then he told everyone and kind of just stuck out Miami as well.
Mm.
So
Because I sincerely thought there was some type of nod to Alpha Phi Alpha.
that works too. So, as an ice cold brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, when I told my line brothers, they was like, "That's crazy." So it works on that level as well, Carlos. So
Great story, man.
yeah, life.
So, so we learned how you got your name, your moniker. How did you get into your field, like doing the things that you're doing? I mean, tell us your journey.
Yeah, so at UCF, I started out as I was trained as an organizational justice and behavioral ethics scholar. So, that literature just resonated with me because I left, financial services, investment banking, because I just felt like it was morally wrong for our, organizational leaders to have these crazy, lavish severance packages, because I was there when it went, the crash of 2008,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it
Yeah.
was, those decisions that they made was one of the reasons Merrill Lynch, who I worked for, had to merge with Bank of America. So it's like they made all these decisions, but the people at the low end of the totem pole were the ones that were getting fired. And I just thought that was immoral. It wasn't right. It was unfair. So that kind of motivated me to like dive into the justice and behavioral ethics literature. And then as I progressed and started looking at, the DEI literature, it was very siloed. So, the behavioral ethics wasn't, starting to talk to the organizational justice scholars, but, no one in behavioral ethics and organizational justice was really interacting and engaging with DEI scholars in the literature. So my first paper in my job market talk was integrating what I learned as a justice and ethics scholar into the DEI world. So I presented kind of my first integration of the literature when we talked about the unwelcoming experience of abusive supervision. So I was like, I don't care, if you look like me or you don't look like me. If you are in a position of power and you are mistreating me, I'm not going to feel like I belong here. I'm not going to feel welcome. That paper was well received on the job market, ended up turning to a nice publication. And ever since then, I've kind of made a academic career integrating across those three disciplines, because conceptually to me, it's all about treating people right, treating people, fairly. So it naturally speaks to a lot of issues in the DEI space. But yeah, so my justice and ethics training kind of led me to ask certain questions that in the DEI literature that I felt like wasn't being asked at the time. So that's kind of how I ended up, doing DEI research, consulting on these issues with companies and things of that nature.
That's
Thank you.
interesting. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that because I hadn't thought about that, because same thing with the corporate social responsibility literature, right? Like at one time they had this umbrella and diversity was one of those facets or dimensions of it. But then I noticed that just over time just kind of dissipated. That conversation just left that domain. I mean, that's not my forte, my wheelhouse, CSR, but it's funny how similarly I appreciate your mind seeing that and wanting to do something about it too. That's cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that my mom is always telling me, as well as my wife and anyone who knows me, they always say I like to fight, right? In terms of if something is bothering me, I just can't let it go. Like I have to say something. I have to let you know, without a shadow of a doubt, like where I stand on this issue. So if something kind of like riles me up, I'm going to say something. You know, it wasn't beneficial in the corporate space, but it has resulted in more wins than losses in my academic career.
That's good. Good for you. Awesome.
That is also very, very empowering. That um,
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that. Um, for everyone who's listening in, I just want to clarify that DEI does not mean didn't earn it. It means diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so,
Exactly.
just in case, just want to start on that basis. And so, when you were studying and are studying organizational justice and ethics and combining it with the research of diversity, equity, and inclusion, um, did you take on, because and the reason why I'm asking this, I'm just wondering, did you take on a perceptual lens when you were looking at how to integrate? Because studying organizational justice or perceptions of justice is what got me uh, into the DEI literature. And then when I think of what's happening in our world today, I think our framing around what's fair and what's just is taking a shift. So I'm just interested because you're telling us about your journey, how you got into the DEI space, but how are you seeing that trajectory go?
So I see the trajectory going in different directions, but it's based upon the audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the prototypical audience in terms of who I'm saying let's integrate these are other academics. And that trajectory has went exceptionally well. Like it's more of like I'm literally getting like invites to go talk at organizations because I have somehow managed to live in this space that merges justice and DEI. I see it in society going two different directions. And like the screening mechanism is basically one's political ideology, right? So if you are, more of a progressive in your political ideology, you are more open to hearing how justice and DEI is integrated. If you have this conservative political ideology, even when you hear it, you try to poke holes in it because it's simply at odds with your political mechanism. So one of the things that's cool about teaching my diversity in cross-cultural management course, we get into what are called cultural screens, and cultural screens are these psychological mechanisms that literally shape how we receive the information that's being presented. And in America, based upon your culture, that screens change. In America, one of the most effective cultural screens is political ideology. It influences how we receive information, our selective perception, our confirmation bias. So I can present the same paper or the same findings, and based upon that political screen, you see value in the work or you don't see value in it. And I'll give you a quick example. So one of my papers, again, playing at this intersection of DEI and ethics. We were my colleagues and I, we looked at how it impacts leadership styles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we found were managers, when they perceive they are in an organization with a strong psychological diversity climate, it increased their subsequent evaluations from their employees of ethical leadership and abusive supervision. So the more this manager perceived that they were in an organization with a strong psychological diversity climate, they were rated higher on ethical leadership and lower on abusive supervision. Conversely, if managers were in organizations they perceived as having a weak psychological diversity climate, they were rated lower on ethical leadership and higher on abusive supervision. So the hook for that paper is if most organizations care about increasing ethical leadership and decreasing abusive supervision, right? You don't want to get sued for abusing people or causing an organizational scandal, right? So that's good. Like people look at, yeah, we need more ethical leadership. We need less abusive supervision. Here's how you get that. And then you bring in psychological diversity climate. If people, progressive ideology, they're more likely to say, hey, it's demonstrated in an experiment and in a field study. Conservatives, I still don't buy it. There has to be something else that explains it. I was like, we control for some other things that doesn't explain it. So I think you just have to understand who you're talking to. And I think as DEI professionals, we have to be okay that we're never going to get everybody to see the value in this work because it inherently challenges the status quo. And when you are challenging
value system.
Value systems, deeply held convictions and things of that nature. So if someone just thinks DEI is about helping, Black people or women, people with visible, invisible disabilities, it doesn't matter how, strong the business case, the empirical evidence it is, it's still, I don't like it because this is what I think it is. Although, from a empirical or research standpoint, what they think it is completely inaccurate. So.
Interesting. I haven't seen that particular research, and I'm wondering, and I know I have to move off of this, but I would hypothesize that there's likely a curvilinear relationship somewhere in there, like to the extent of your extremism of your beliefs, one in one direction or another. Because there could be a point of being too progressive where you feel like nothing is enough, or could you?
Yeah.
That's an interesting take. Yeah, I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, so with most of the research that we do, in general, I tend to believe at some point there is this diminishing value, and that's where the curvilinear relationship comes in. I also think when you're studying this stuff, like how you measure it really matters. So the measure.
Wait. Before you go in, I have to say this. So if my 12-year-old were listening and heard you say the psychological climate, psychological diversity climate, can you explain that to my 12-year-old in a way that she might understand it? And I realized I didn't explain what I meant by curvilinear relationship, but just so we can make sure everybody can follow you.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're getting real heady right now. Like, folks are going to have to pull out dictionaries to let. No, I'm just kidding. No, thank you. Good for pointing it out. Yeah, and also what it means to control for another variable. Because I was going to interject that, but you can, for our audience. Thank you.
Yeah, so Carlos, if I had to explain this to a 12-year-old, I think I'm good because my 14-year-old daughter has really gotten into the research that I've done. She's super involved in civics now, and she was all excited when Vice President Harris was running. So I've had to explain this to not a 12-year-old, but a 14-year-old. So psychological diversity climate is the extent you believe your company, where you are working, actually have policies and practices that helps everyone be promoted. They're removing barriers that impact certain individuals. So the more you do that, there's just this natural agreement that, yes, this company is inclusive. This company understands certain individuals have barriers that others don't. So that's how I would explain it. To what extent your company is aware that we have different people in the workplace, and we have to make those individuals feel welcome by removing barriers that could be in place, in promoting, in developing whoever is in our workplace no matter, our different identities. But if you're here, we're going to develop you.
Okay.
So that's how I would explain it to your 12-year-old. You can get back to me if that worked or not.
I
Call us.
will.
Yeah, and to your point, Jason, when we say you're controlling for other variables, you're just accounting for alternative explanations. So, hey, this may also impact this finding, or why we think this psychological diversity climate is increasing ethical leadership, right? It could be that they have an ethical culture and that's what's driving, the ethical leadership, or this person just is a nice, ethically oriented, morally strong individual. So we want to account for potentially alternative explanations to really say we have something here.
Yeah. And you know what? I wish we could talk about your research, because I really like your research, especially the one about people who support Trump and abusive supervisory roles. I mean, like, we can go on and on, but we have limited time.
Yeah.
We do. And I'm
We're going to have to
sorry.
invite you back just
that's
for a
what
research
that
session.
means.
Yeah.
Just for a research session.
We'll talk offline in terms of how much of how much stuff we had to go through to get those published. That was a journey.
Yeah. Oh,
Ooh,
that's a good
the
conversation.
story behind. Okay.
Yeah. Whew. Jesus.
But all of that, what you're saying, it also impacts healthcare outcomes, right? They've gotten rid of, now they want to say, you can't say DEI, get rid of DEI. But what we've seen is because of, I like this term, cultural screens, right? It's biases, things like that. Those impact how nurses and doctors and other providers treat patients, and it all has an impact on outcomes. So that, even though they don't want to talk about it, certainly there is something to be talked about.
Absolutely. That sounds like a paper, man. Read cultural screens in healthcare, some collaboration.
I mean, you don't want to call it DEI. We'll call it
what?
Yeah. Oh,
what's the next question?
I was about to say, I'm up for the next question because then, I was about to piggyback on that, but I will stay on somewhat of a track. Dr. Ice. Sorry, I'm never gonna now, especially now that I know the story. I'm probably gonna chuckle every time I say it. But Dr. Ice, can you share? No, not can you? Please share an accomplishment or project or an event related to DEI that you helped plan, that you worked on or currently working on, that you are proud of, or that you believe is important to share.
So many to share, but what I am actually proud of, like an accomplishment, happened last week. Yeah, so I was the inaugural faculty recipient of Miami's University's MLK Service Award. So
yeah, kudos to the flyer.
Yeah.
I saw that online.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So it meant a lot because the story behind it is last year, our Office of Transformation and Inclusive Excellence, as well as the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion at Miami University, start asking various people at Miami, like, hey, who on campus, lives up to the ideals of Dr. MLK
Wow.
Jr. So when I got the email saying, hey, you're nominated, you're going to, receive this recognition, it was an extremely humbling event, because I know I make a lot of noise, like for for better or worse. I know sometimes I may cause headaches for individuals in terms of how outspoken I am on certain issues, but to have, students, faculty, and staff say like, yo, we see you, we see the work that you do, not just in, your research and teaching, but the service that you are providing to the students and helping, them achieve their goals in the spirit of removing barriers, fighting for equity and equality. That really meant a lot for me. So that is one accomplishment that I was proud of. And then when I got it, I took a picture of it. I texted to my oldest daughter. I have 3 kids, a 14-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old son, and a 7-year-old daughter. So my 14-year-old daughter, I texted to her a picture of it, and she texts back, "I'm so proud of you, Daddy." And I was like, "You've never said you've been proud of me in my life." But she was like, "No, I'm always proud of you, but I just really wanted to so her texting back saying, "I'm so proud of you," that made it even more special.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, why am I crying?
I know, right? That is beautiful.
That was the accomplishment right there. That was really what made the day, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The text,
Yeah.
like, oh, it hits
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Because dads and the daddy-daughter relationship is super special.
Mm-hmm.
You're overprotective. These are my princesses, and a little boy better not ever try, my my babies, right? So,
Yeah.
you always have this protective, spirit or whatnot. And then for her to be like, I see you, Dad, like that. I'm so proud of you. Yeah. I mean, I didn't shed a tear because I'm a G, Carlos. Carlos, you're like my wife. My wife, she's so I call her a water bag. We'll be watching TV and something happens, she'll just start. I was like, "Why are you crying?" But yeah, so that was really really special.
I plead the fifth because my wife is right here.
Smart man, smart man. That PhD comes in handy, huh?
Listen, I'm gonna tell you why I tear up. I teared up because I mean, you and I, we've had some conversations. We've worked on some committees together. We've done some stuff together. And I know that what I know about you is that all the noise that you may make, the smoke that you may raise, and all of the service that you do is, I know that you do it not just for today's challenges, but for the future. And, how do you establish and lead a legacy for your children's children? And so when you said that your daughter said, "I'm proud of you," because I know that your kids, I mean, we're all parents on this panel. They don't see all that we sacrifice, all the
That's true.
smoke that we get to try to, like you said, just make the world, the working world, just a better and more just and equitable place so that when they enter the workforce and when they have their own jobs, they don't have to deal with some of the crap. And so, they don't know that. So I'm like, I started crying because I could just imagine like, wow, she sees you and you probably didn't even know that she sees you like that.
Yeah, it's like the roles reversed.
Yeah, so you kind of, based upon the conversations, we've had last year and kind of just seeing her come into her voice, whether it's, her going on and on and on about the TikTok ban and shutting down my rights, freedom. I'm like, okay, right. I can't get the apple's not falling too far from the tree, so I gotta give her that. But yes, to your point, Carlos, that is one of the reasons because you all know like this work is difficult. Like, some people see the value, but then some people will, you become a target because you're doing this work for others. So that is one of the reasons that keeps me like motivated is like, like I want, my children, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren to, have a more equitable and inclusive society.
So speaking to that, you said doing that work, how has that been in Ohio, specifically working with DEI?
So yeah, in Ohio, it's been weird. It's been mixed. So
So y'all had those visitors on the bridge.
yeah. So yeah, yeah. The that as what happened in Lincoln Heights, I was not surprised given it's a predominantly black neighborhood and it's like FAFO. So yeah, they got it ran up out of there, really quick. Uh, but for the work being in Ohio, it's mixed because we've had our anti-DEI legislation pending for more than 2 years.
Hmm.
So when the first bill that was introduced was Ohio Senate Bill 83, and everyone just thought that was going to pass. So, we started the school made the decision to change some of the names. They asked me to change my course title. They was like, "Oh, you're diversity and cross cultural management. Can you just call it cross cultural management?" My colleague who teaches it with me, we pushed back, right? And I pushed back very forcefully because I read the bill. I said, first of all, the bill hasn't even passed, and even if you read the bill, it says nothing in this bill should be misconstrued to impact class and course instruction. So I'm not changing my title, and I also feel like this request is politically motivated and did not have anything to do with the content or the curriculum that we teach. I knew that was going to make its way to our general counsel office. That's why I feel like this is politically motivated. Less than 30 minutes later, we get a response that we can keep the name, the diversity, cross cultural management.
Good for you. That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
but yeah, you have to know what's in the bill and what it impacts and what it doesn't impact because a lot of people just take what other people say, word
Mhm.
as gospel, and don't read it from themselves. So it's just hearsay. So we've been allowed to, do what we've always, done. So my work, my research is being funded. I go to the conferences. I'm not being shut down anyway. And in my role as a professor, now our Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion was changed to the Office of Transformational and Inclusive Excellence. And directors of student diversity, equity, and inclusion have been, director of said program. So we have, dealt with some of the name changes in Ohio. Um, the people, at least in staff, in my opinion, when you're staff, you don't have the same protections as faculty. So, they're just being, dictated like this is what it's going to be. I'm going to change your title because I can change your title as opposed to you can't change. You can ask me to change this course, but academic freedom says I like you gave me this. Like we literally made the recommendation to switch from cross-cultural management to diversity and cross-cultural management back in 2020 when everyone was on the DEI hype train. So it's been mixed. And now it seems like this new push to get it passed is going to be successful. But I submitted, my written testimony. We have opposition hearings tomorrow for the bill. I can't make it, so I just submitted my written testimony. But the work continues. I think no matter what, this work continues because um, I truly believe this work is rooted in systemic anti-Black racism. And what we know in this particular country, that systemic anti-Black racism, it evolves, it morphs, it changes. It's like this virus, right? If you don't kill it, it just changes and finds a new host. In DEI, evidence-based approach, to DEI initiatives, that is like the cure. Like that is what's going to kill this virus. So our work changes to meet this new manifestation of it. So I don't think, regardless of what laws you pass, the work will get done. So yeah, Ohio's it's been mixed. It hasn't been as, kind of this forceful ban that you see in my home state of Florida, where like, my colleagues are like, yo, it's crazy down here. You probably have some similar experiences in Texas. So we're not there, but we're also not, California or Oregon, Washington or New York, where it's like we're living in like completely different realities.
Countries almost.
Yeah.
In one country.
Yeah.
Really?
Speaking of Texas, my home state, what do you find most troubling about the DEI narrative in Texas and other red states? Because we know that scholarship and research, it permeates across all of these borders, and I know you hear and see what's going on and have other colleagues. So we are curious to know about your perspective.
Yeah, so the most troubling aspect of the narrative is just how blatantly mischaracterized it is. It's like
That part.
They know, when I say these I would consider they as DEI opponents, right? They know they can't win like on scholarship and research. Like the business case is too solid. You have all these scholars at leading institutions from across the planet, not just in America, right? From across the planet that shows the value of DEI, right? So I was like, all right, we can't win, that battle. So we're just going to completely mischaracterize, intentionally lie about it. So it's the gross mischaracterization, the lies just being, peddled, and how it's just thrown out there just to kind of, rile up folks, who are against diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think this kind of goes back to what happened in Maryland when the boating accident, the ferry hits the bridge collapsed, and then they blame that on DEI, or the horrible plane accident that happened over in the DC area, and then they blame that on DEI. So even like most recently, like
Trump's assassination attempt was also blamed on DEI.
Yeah, and speaking of Trump, he also blamed the Chiefs' attention being on DEI as the reason they got blew out in the Super Bowl. So it's just so like the mischaracterization in terms of like this is what DEI is all about. Like the opponents, falsely leveling the accusation that these programs, and again, it's a lot of it is rooted in anti-Black racism. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but the DEI hires, when you think of DEI hires, they generally are aimed at Black people, other people of color, but Black people. Like when Vice President Harris became the nominee, it was a lot of stuff about her, being a DEI, candidate, despite her being the actual vice president, a senator from, the state of California, an attorney general so all of her credentials and qualifications don't matter, because her skin complexion. So that's the most troubling aspect about this. Is like you just lie, because I mean, if you're a person of color, particularly if you are a Black person, you can't be mediocre, right? If we're mediocre, there is no way we're getting a job. We're not getting promoted. We're not being admitted into colleges, selective programs if we are mediocre. Oftentimes, at least I was told growing up in the South, right, Florida, and my mom made it clear that you have to be twice as good just to get half of what they got, right? So there's no room for, people with marginalized identities to be mediocre. So
that right there, exactly.
So that's kind of it was like we're somehow unqualified in taking spots from, these extremely deserving white people. And that has always been a pet peeve of mine. Because when I say, do you know this person's qualifications? It's like, no. But I know this person is not qualified or should have went to someone else who doesn't look like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the three of us are based in Texas. I would just add, something that you said about being in Ohio and how you were able to refute the Senate bill by reading it. I would say that's probably one of the differences that we're seeing, well, that I've observed, is that for those of us that do read and do present, like, well, these are what your word says, it doesn't matter. Well, you didn't, there is the difference between what's written and what's the spirit of the law, and they will win in public opinion and, force compliance, even if it's not written. And so that's why I feel like there's a challenge, because, I read the fine print, I read everything. And then when I read it and say, well, wait, it didn't say this. You're like,
Right.
So, I don't have to say that because this is what I meant.
Yeah, we had a lot of that. If you were watching, most y'all are watching the news, but for the audience, if you're watching news, what's going on in Texas, there's a lot of overcompliance, right? Even before the bill passed. So our bill is SB 17, Senate Bill SB 17, and it prohibits DEI offices, any office for DEI. But however,
in public universities.
In public universities. Thank you for telling me. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, it's not the private sector, right? And it's not other programs, even though now they're trying to extend that so that if you receive any type of federal funding, that you can't do any DEI type of work, diversity, equity, inclusion work. But a similar situation with overcompliance, because the bill, its scope does not cover teaching, does not cover research either. But it still had this
student recruitment activities.
Student recruitment activities.
Because I read it.
Yeah. It's student recruitment activity. Yeah. So anything dealing with education. So I guess student recruitment, right, underneath that umbrella of teaching. But it still had that chilling effect, because I think, like you said, Dr. Ice, I got to use it, the term, Dr. Ice. A lot of folks aren't reading. So, man, all listeners out there, read everything, okay? Because a lot of this is, of course, we know that they want to do away with the programs, but some of this they know might be unconstitutional. They know they might lose. And so is this term called, I just learned the other day, called muzzle velocity.
Ooh.
So Steve, it's a strategy that Steve Bannon came up with. He coined the term, where it's basically hit everybody with a whole bunch of stuff and leave them confused. So that by the time they figure it out, you hit them with something else. So that now they have to leave this and go to the next and on to the next and on to the next. And so it leaves everyone paralyzed. And I know for this entire year, everyone was paralyzed. Fortunately, we did some listening sessions to let people understand that. And people had this awakening, this aha moment. They didn't realize, like, oh, I can teach this class, or I can do some research. They had no idea. And so it's very important for everybody to go out there and read. And with the but as of yet, even still, we haven't been asked to change the names of our classes I'm not going to name it, at where I work at my university. But there are some that they are asking instructors to scrub the names, the titles of their courses and their curriculum. And so it's very scary. But what, I know, Ty, you had a question we talked about earlier you want to ask.
I did have a question in terms of Dr. Isa. How do you combat these opponents of DEI? Because like you said, the work has to continue. It's rooted in, we know what it's rooted in, right? And so as a healthcare professional, as a nurse, I see that these issues severely impact Black women and Black people. And so as a researcher myself, how do I go about continuing the work?
So, excellent question. I think I don't give DEI opponents a lot of credit, but what I do give them credit for, and where I feel like sometimes us as DEI proponents, we don't have that same willingness to basically say, I'll see you in court, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because, 2020 was this country's racial reckoning, right? Everyone got on board. The folks who did not like it was like, I don't care if I have this unfavorable opinion at the moment. I'm going to take this case to court. And like, I don't care what you think. I'm going to take this case to court. That's how they got affirmative action, struck down, right? It's it's a violation of the 14th Amendment, right? Is, giving certain advantages to black and brown students and making it more difficult for white and Asian students, right? And they were willing to kind of get in the legal arena. To your question, Ty, I don't think we have that same willingness to the muzzle velocity that Carlos and Jason was talking about. Is we're going to hit you with this, we're going to hit you with this. But if you don't have anyone, on campus in your organization saying, why are you asking me to do this when this is unconstitutional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And literally, like I made a post when SB1 came up. Miami knows that if this bill passed, this guy will be a plaintiff in the federal lawsuit. And he's already told us like the reasons he thinks this bill is unconstitutional, right? It's a violation of institutional autonomy, faculty academic freedom, First and 14th Amendment violations. But if you don't have someone who's like, all right, bet, that's your approach, I think that approach is illegal, and I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to defend my rights, right? This is viewpoint restriction. You can't get over that. And so I think we do have to be willing to say, all right, you've passed this bill, but this bill is unconstitutional. So what we are starting to see, whether we're talking about Trump's present executive order banning DEI in Florida, their DEI bill was Florida Senate Bill 266. Alabama has one as well, but the bills in Florida and Alabama are facing legal challenge, right? The President Trump's executive order is also facing a legal challenge. And as professors, we can kind of appreciate this, right? So we all know these are like copycat bills from the original, the genesis of all this was Florida's Stop Woke Act, right? It would be my home state, right? We always there's always a competition between Florida and Texas who can kind of be the craziest, right? But people forget that the Stop Woke Act was passed in April of 2022, but struck down as unconstitutional in November of 2022 due to academic freedom violations and First and 14th Amendment violations. So as soon as it got challenged, a federal judge put an injunction on it from taking effect. And one of the reasons these state bills are targeting public universities and not private companies in the state anymore, because that section of banning, mandatory trainings from private employers, that was also struck down by the same judge in Florida in terms of this being unconstitutional. It was like a state can't dictate to a private employer what they can ask or require their employees to be trained on. whether we're talking about DEI, security, fraud, training, whatnot, it is not the state's place to say you need to have this training or you can't have that training. But since it's generally a copy and paste job, the federal challenges across the states read very similar in terms of there's a problem with academic freedom, right? But the main argument is you can't get away from the viewpoint restriction, right? It is the state saying, I don't like this topic of DEI and I'm trying to censor it. So it's the viewpoint restriction which makes it this First Amendment violation. And then when you start disbanding these programs and the funding that comes along with it, it disproportionately impacts people with protected classes, and that makes it a 14th Amendment violation because it's got to be equal protection under the law. So it's not racially neutral. It's like if you read the Alabama legal complaint, Alabama goes in. Like the ACLU, I read that and I got excited. I was like, they know what they're talking about, right? Mm. But they was like, this is disproportionately impacting Black faculty, staff, and the students. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons Ohio bill had stalled for 2 years. Because I talked to, the people who are, I was like, if we fire everyone in the DEI office, that's mainly Black people. Like, you will literally open yourself up for a lawsuit because this employment action you're taking at the state level is incongruent with federal law. Like, it can't disproportionately impact, people with protected classes. So I think that's why people have been reassigned, because someone is saying, all right, if we implement this, will we sue for gender or racial discrimination? Because these laws, given who's actually doing the work and care about this, it's disproportionately people with marginalized identities. But you have to have people willing to fight that. And sometimes if I'm a junior faculty or a staff, I may not want to, rock the boat. So I do think that's why it's important for, tenured faculty or people who just don't I don't care about this job. Like, this is wrong. To be willing to say, okay, cool. You got this short-term win. You and I both know this bill is unconstitutional. It's like when someone copies a bad paper. Like, the original person got an F. So what do you think you finna get on this assignment? So, but we do, Ty, we have to be willing to, stand 10 toes down and say, all right, they're coming for these programs. What exactly are we doing that's illegal? So, walk me through, how are we violating the law? Because the scholarship is not restricted by race. Anyone can apply. It's a first-gen, scholarship program. It's just not for Black people. No, Black and brown students are disproportionately first-gen college students because our ancestors were not always allowed to go to, universities and whatnot. So I think when a university knows that this person or this group of people is speaking out on these issues, they're more likely to we're going to have pushback and let me really think this through. So I just think we have to really be willing to, if we have to go to court, we will go to court.
Which does require a considerable amount of funding. Just
funding and organizing. And okay, or you're going to say
organizing.
And you're going to say or.
Yeah, I didn't want to cut anyone off. Not necessarily, right? So the ACLU and the NAACP, once you start reading the legal, so you guys know, I be reading, right?
Yes. Come with it, Dr. Ice.
I'm following these cases, right? So oftentimes they will work pro bono, right? Because it's impacting a lot of their members. Because if faculty and staff or students are members of the NAACP, they can bring the lawsuit on behalf of the members because they have like what is called association standing. So it's like your law is negatively impacting my members. This is what your law is causing. The adverse harm is causing my members, these acts. So the individual is not necessarily named. It is the NAACP or the ACL. The ACLU does a lot of um, filing the cases and arguing um, the cases. I've had several conversations with folks in the NAACP and ACLU in different states because there is there is like a resistance organizing, and you just have to have a willing party to say, this is the email that I got. Look, I was able to go to this conference last year, but I'm no longer able to go because the university won't use department funds to allow me to go to this conference to present my research, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, you have to have standing to bring that suit. So no one in, we'll say Texas is willing to say, I'm like, this is impacting me. It doesn't happen. Fortunately, in Florida and Alabama and these other states, we see like faculty and students working, strategically with the ACLU and NAACP to challenge the constitutionality of these bills. So like the path is there. There's no need to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you for sharing. That was some good stuff because, that's what people ask me all the time, or people are wondering, like, what can I do? Because it's time to stop just being shocked, and it's almost like it's entertaining now to see what's the next development. And I think that's the way they're kind of starting to condition us to get into the cycle of, again, paralysis again, when it's time to actually do things, do stuff, right? So I'm glad you mentioned NAACP, ACLU. And so I guess the people can kind of call, join, find out what's going on that way, right? I'm going to wrap us up with the last question, though. And this is the most fun part of the hour. Drum roll. Drum roll for the top 5 faves question. So, Dr. Ice, you wanted us to ask you. I love this question. You didn't have to share the answers. You shared the answers with me already too.
We haven't seen the answer.
I haven't seen the answer. No.
So y'all need to check your emails. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I want to be surprised. Debate aloud. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
Who are your top 5 athletes? Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to ask you to do this, if you don't mind. Can you put them in ranking order, like the least to the number 1 top? Because when you listed it, I don't know if they were in just random order or not, because I saw a name on there I was kind of curious about, like, this should be number 1. So I'm just wondering.
Wait, I want to start with the top because that's an interesting story.
Okay.
Right?
You the guess. That's all good. That'll work.
But it's splitting hairs. But number 1, Jerry Rice. Right? So greatest of all time receiver, but growing up, I'm from Jacksonville, so we didn't have an NFL team until 1995 when we had the Jaguars. But prior to that, I was a huge San Francisco 49ers fan. Still cheer for the 49ers to this day. But I used to always tell people that Jerry Rice is my uncle, right? So I always tell people that Jerry Rice is my uncle. I was like, yo, my uncle's out here doing it, right? So
Wow.
Yeah. So I always tell people that. So Jerry, top number 1 all time, Jerry Rice.
Uncle Jerry.
Yeah. Unc. Got to show Unc love, right?
Okay, that's a good one. You know what? I get it now. I can accept that. I like the story behind it. There's a story with it. Okay, got it.
So number 2, MJ, right? Love MJ in my mind. Number 1 NBA player of all time because I got to like watch like MJ like beat MJ and just see like this dude does not lose. How like you gotta hope he's just off, right?
Yeah.
So that's number two. Number three, Kobe Bryant. Love Kobe.
Yeah, you can't have MJ without Kobe. You know, it's almost
Yeah.
like they're hand in hand, right?
Yeah. So and for me, like it was this person is the second coming of MJ. Like
Yes,
the
yes.
mannerisms, the game, just the assassin mentality, and just like his will and desire to not be defeated no matter like the odds. So
Yeah.
also, Carlos, you can appreciate this. Sometimes I just lock in with the Mamba mentality doing this DEI work.
I
Right?
do. I was going to say, I listen to Mama
Like,
mentality.
yeah. You just gotta like, tunnel vision. This is going to get done. It's nothing you can do to stop me. Number 4 is Scottie Pippen. Did a book report on Scottie Pippen. Just loved his versatility. And just a huge Chicago Bulls fan going on, but just love like his versatility, right? In terms of this guy could do everything that you want him to do on the court.
MJ's the greatest, but it'd be no MJ without Scottie.
Yeah, like
Exactly,
like, yeah. Like
Boom, boom,
I love
boom.
the team. Like it was dynamic duo.
They had that energy. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's some
definitely.
extra excitement from the Chicago delegation.
That's right. You know, Chi-Town, Southside.
Yeah, and me, I love a team or a duo who can just dominate in their craft, in their sport, because sustained excellence is difficult. So I've always had this admiration for teams, organizations, people, teammates who have a level of sustained excellence. So there's something about sustaining excellence that has always like garnered a lot of respect and admiration from me. So down to number 5, as an FSU proud graduate, I had to throw my favorite football player in, and that is Peter Warwick, right? Peter Warwick, the most explosive college football player that I've seen. Like, you know, growing up, one of the reasons I wanted to go to Florida State is because of seeing like what he did on the football field, Warwick Dunn and Charlie Ward and all the FSU greats. But it was just like, this guy is a highlight waiting to happen. Like you think you have him bottled up and whatnot. So Peter Warwick definitely up there in my top 5, and that was difficult because I have a ton of athletes I absolutely love, but I had to put Peter Warwick in there.
Okay, that's a great top 5. I like that. I like that. That's top 5. And I see. Petty Professor Carlos put in the chat, sustained excellence. Yeah, that's the first time I heard that term. I like that term a lot.
Yeah.
We got this. I feel like every podcast we should have, what was the word? What was the phrase of the podcast?
What's the word of the
that's
day?
it.
I like that.
Word of the day.
Word of the
Sustained
day.
excellence. So if y'all want to know how he came up with it, he assessed his top 5 based on a framework of sustained excellence.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it is, because you can like catch lightning in the bottle, everything happens and you win the championship or you win a scoring title or MVP, right? But that tends to be it. Right. It's like, hey, I done figured this thing out and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Right. So that sustained excellence, the level of like, I'm going to impose my will because I done figured it out and I'm willing to put in the work. And if you're not going to work at the same level or intensity that I'm going to work in, I'm going to come out victorious. So it's kind of like the dedication to the craft, you know, the hours that you put in perfecting, you know, your craft or whatnot. That's like, I have a ton of respect for like, I can't stand the Patriots, right? But I was like, what?
Oh yeah,
That guy Tom Brady sustained excellence, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he won a lot
Oh,
in New England, and then he goes down and won in Tampa Bay. So it's just like the
wherever he
evil
goes.
empire of the Yankees, right? People call it
Mhm.
the evil empire, but
Mhm.
sustained excellence.
Sustained
So
excellence.
yeah, I've always had an appreciation for sustained excellence.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ice, Darryl.
yes, thank you.
This has been a
Lovely meeting you
great way
again.
to
Yeah,
kick
this
off.
was fun. This was fun.
Yeah, great way to kick off our first episode, Top 5 DEI. On that note, we don't want to take up all of your time. I want to thank you again, Darryl, Dr. Ice. It's good knowing you. Thanks for showing up.
This was fun. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to talk about, DEI and the period that we are in is definitely some significant challenges, but I also think there are some golden opportunities in this moment, understanding that, there is a resistance. There is, people who truly believe and see the value of this work. And I just think we're just naturally more resilient and more tenacious than this new wave of, anti-DEI, anti-wokeness that's happening. But I definitely appreciate the opportunity to come on and be a guest in Top 5 DEI podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And for our audience, if you enjoyed tonight's podcast, please make sure you share, subscribe, and like. And also feel free to email us at top5deipodcast@gmail.com. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Peace out.
Good morning. Good
All right.
afternoon.